The first signs were almost invisible: soft tremors beneath Jezero crater, faint mineral blooms appearing like frost across dunes that haven't seen water in billions of years. Mars had always been a quiet, sleeping world, a place where dust drifts and time feels frozen. But as 3I Atlas drew nearer, the red planet began to whisper. Its atmosphere flickered with unexpected auroras, its crust hummed with low-frequency pulses, and its pale skies developed glimmers of gold at dawn. It was as if something, or someone, had begun to work, silently, across an entire planet. And as we drift together into this mystery, let me pause just briefly. Where in the world are you listening tonight? I find it remarkable how many curious minds gather in this quiet corner of the internet. If you're enjoying this sleepy exploration, a gentle like and subscribe helps keep the journey flowing, and it means you'll never miss the next step into the unknown. The world's telescopes now track 3I Atlas with a focus once reserved for eclipses or comets. But this isn't a normal visitor. Its golden lattice, shimmering like slow lightning, extends filaments toward Mars's magnetosphere, a handshake across vacuum. Those who first noticed dismissed it as solar wind distortion. Days later, the patterns became too regular, too architectural to explain away. Imagine, if you will, a gardener kneeling over frozen soil, loosening the crust, letting air seep down to hidden roots. That's how the changes on Mars feel, like a careful cultivation rather than a violent impact. Small plumes rise from canyons once silent. A pale mist coils over Olympus Mons. Instruments designed to measure dead air now show faint chemical signatures they weren't built to detect. The question hanging over every scientist's screen glows brighter with each passing night. Is this terraforming or a test? If 3I Atlas has been shaping the red planet, what does it mean for Earth? For us, watching from the next world over? For now, the changes are quiet, almost tender. But the pace is quickening. Something that took eons on Earth is being written into Martian soil in a matter of days. And with every pulse of golden light from 3I Atlas, Mars feels less like an ancient desert and more like a canvas, a world waiting for its first stroke of new life. The first time the orbiters caught the pattern, it was almost missed, a triangular glint tucked inside the haze over Valles Marineris, like sunlight on glass. When the images were enhanced, faint ridges appeared, rising and falling in geometric waves across the canyon floor. They weren't buildings, at least not in the way we imagine, but formations shaped as though some invisible hand had combed the dust into spirals and grids. Each day the angles sharpened, like frozen music slowly coming into tune. Even from millions of kilometers away, the sense of intent was unmistakable. NASA's spectrometers reported spikes of strange compounds near the patterns, compounds never seen before on Mars but eerily familiar to certain meteorite signatures tied to 3I Atlas itself. It was as though the interstellar traveler was reaching into the Martian crust and pulling out hidden ingredients, rewriting the desert from beneath. Telescopes around the world began to schedule night-long vigils. Amateur astronomers reported a faint gold shimmer even through backyard scopes. Radio observatories detected a low, rolling hum that seemed to spread from Mars outward, soft enough to miss unless you knew where to listen. Those who did listen found their heartbeats slowing, their breath falling into rhythm with the pulses. Back on Earth, a strange quiet formed in the control rooms. Data scrolled by. Temperature maps, magnetic shifts, seismic rumbles, but the usual chatter, the click of keyboards, the low murmur of speculation, all faded. It was as if the red planet itself had become a cathedral, and everyone, even across millions of miles, felt compelled to whisper. For those following along tonight, drifting off to sleep or sitting awake with headphones, think about this. When a world begins to change, it doesn't shout. It trembles, it glows, it hums. It leaves small clues scattered like breadcrumbs across its own terrain. The story of Mars is writing itself in real time, and 3i Atlas is the pen hovering just above the page. If the first signs were frost and auroras, this is the handwriting emerging. Every curve in the dust, every shimmer of gold, every pulse in the thin Martian air, all of it suggests a design. And like any design seen too early, we can only guess at the finished picture. We're not just watching a planet anymore. We're watching a work in progress, a transformation playing out across a rusty canvas under alien hands. By the third week of observation, the tremors had grown into something unmistakable. Instruments designed to record the faintest Marsquakes began to show a repeating rhythm, a pulse steady and deep, like a slow drumbeat echoing through stone. Unlike the random quakes Mars occasionally experiences, this vibration was symmetrical, building and fading with precise intervals. Scientists called it the heartbeat, though no one dared speculate what kind of heart could make it. Above the canyon systems, a shimmering haze flickered with golden filaments. They rose and fell like the breath of a sleeping creature, condensing over certain regions, then dissolving into thin air. Radar scans revealed cavities forming under the crust, patterns that resembled honeycomb tunnels or lattice scaffolds. No natural process on Mars produced anything like this. In labs and living rooms around the world, people watched live feeds in the quiet of their own nights. Some felt uneasy, others oddly calm. The pulse was subtle enough to miss, yet once you noticed it, you couldn't unhear it, like a far-off train or the ocean beneath a boardwalk. Listeners reported strange dreams of walking through long corridors of red stone, hearing a sound like a distant organ note. Take a slow breath. Imagine Mars, once dead and silent, now resonating softly like a bell just struck. It's not a roar or a quake, but a tone, an invitation. The question whispered in observatories and message boards alike. Is 3i Atlas simply stirring the crust, or is it teaching Mars a rhythm, loosening its bones to make them ready for something else? Each day the pulse strengthens, and new fissures appear like veins of gold across the rust-colored plains. Dust devils gather along invisible lines. The thin atmosphere carries whispers of compounds that shouldn't exist. Mars, once a silent rock, has become a resonant instrument, and we, from across the void, are its accidental audience. It began as a faint mist on satellite images, like thin gauze over the planet's horizon. Within days, the veil thickened, transforming the sky above Mars into a pale, shimmering gold at dawn and dusk. This was no mere dust storm. The particles refracted sunlight at angles unseen before, creating halos and phantom suns. The red planet, long defined by its rust hue, now wore a golden crown. Spectral analysis revealed the particles carried traces of exotic ices, compounds only stable in deep space, somehow surviving the Martian atmosphere. The distribution matched the arcs of 3i Atlas's own filaments, as though the visitor were seeding the upper air. Researchers began referring to it as the veil, and in forums late at night, the word spread with the same hush usually reserved for prophecies. Observers noticed behavioral changes in Mars' already thin clouds. Wisps coiled along invisible paths, sculpting curves that echoed the geometry etched into the surface below. Olympus Mons wore a collar of luminous mist, and even the polar caps glimmered faintly. The veil acted like a canvas, catching sunlight in slow ripples, and for the first time in centuries, Mars looked less like a dead world and more like a living painting in motion. As you listen now, drifting through these images, picture yourself standing at the edge of that horizon. Golden mist rolling above, a soft hum under your feet, a sense that something vast is unfolding beyond human scale. Breathe in slowly and imagine the taste of thin, cold air touched with starlight. Scientists debated openly. Was the veil a byproduct, a shield, or the first stage of terraforming? The idea felt audacious, even dangerous, yet the evidence grew harder to deny. Mars's temperatures edged upward, its atmosphere thickened microscopically, and the color of its sunsets shifted. The veil had changed the planet's portrait overnight, and through it all, 3i Atlas glided quietly, its golden lattice extended like a hand over a sleeping child. No transmissions, no obvious mechanisms, just a patient, deliberate shaping of a world. The red planet was no longer simply red, and perhaps no longer ours to define. It had entered a new chapter, and we were witnessing the first lines being written in gold. Weeks passed, and high-resolution orbiters revealed more of Mars than we had ever seen. Across the red plains, faintly glowing lines appeared like veins beneath skin. From orbit, they looked like geometric crop circles, hexagons, spirals, and channels that converged on nodes. They were not etched, but altered, mineral layers recrystallizing into new arrangements, as if the planet's very bones were being rewritten. On Earth, geologists compared the images to fossilized coral or honeycomb reefs, but the symmetry was too precise, the scaling too deliberate. When mapped over ancient Martian riverbeds, the patterns aligned perfectly, as though 3i Atlas had traced the ghost water of a planet's forgotten past and was now repopulating it with invisible scaffolding. Inside control rooms, the tone of conversation shifted from "what is happening" to "what comes next." The thin Martian atmosphere had begun to echo the rhythm of these shapes. Dust devils coalesced into stable vortices, swirling in clockwork formation over the new patterns. Orbiters recorded faint electrical activity in the air, micro-lightning flickers along the golden lines. Take a slow breath. Imagine walking across a desert at dawn, seeing the ground itself glow faintly beneath your boots, like sleeping circuitry under thin sand. That's what Mars looks like now, a world waking up beneath its surface, patterns revealing themselves like a hidden code. This wasn't just rearrangement, it was choreography. Every shift in the soil matched the comet's distant pulses. Every filament traced a path as though guided by a patient architect. If terraforming was the goal, this was the blueprint. A lattice whispered into stone, a song imprinted in the dust. By the 6th week, Mars's atmosphere, that thin, stubborn envelope, began to thicken almost imperceptibly. Not enough for headlines, but enough for instruments. Micro-layers of exotic particles suspended like mist, altering how light scattered across the sky. Dawn now rose pale copper fading to gold. Dusk sank crimson fading to amber. The red planet's color palette was quietly changing. Spectrometers detected compounds never stable here before. Nitrogen chains, strange silicates, hints of rare noble gases. These molecules were heavier than the air they replaced, yet somehow remained aloft, as if held by an unseen mesh. Scientists speculated that 3i Atlas was seeding the upper air with a molecular scaffold, a net designed to catch and hold atmosphere where otherwise it would flee. In remote stations and spare bedrooms, the watchers sat in headphones at 2 a.m., listening to the pulse transformed into sound. They described it as a low drum behind a waterfall, steady and hypnotic. Some claimed the sound had started to appear in their dreams, a background hum like ocean waves. Mars is learning to breathe, one forum post read. It was upvoted thousands of times before disappearing into the tide of new data. Take another slow breath. Imagine a dry lung filling with air for the first time in eons, tissue expanding, veins opening. That's how Mars seems now, inhaling faintly, its thin air becoming just slightly less thin, its dust shimmering with something new. Speculation grew bolder. Was this the first step toward a breathable sky? Or was it only a temporary cocoon, a laboratory atmosphere for whatever process would follow? No transmissions came from 3i Atlas to clarify. Its golden lattice simply hung in the darkness, filaments extended toward the red planet like an unseen weaver tending her loom. Mars, once a frozen tableau, now flickers and hums under a new light. For the first time, the question isn't only what we're observing, it's what is observing back, shaping an entire planet as gently as an artist shading the first strokes of a portrait. And somewhere in that portrait, a future world might already be waiting. By the 7th week, orbiters began recording something no model had predicted: currents of wind threading across Mars in long, continuous arcs. Mars has always been known for thin, chaotic gusts, dust storms and devils swirling at random. Now, however, these gusts were no longer chaotic. They moved in lines, braiding and unbraiding, as if following invisible highways in the air. When mapped, the winds formed the same spirals and hexagons etched into the ground. It was as if 3I Atlas had taken Mars's atmosphere and drawn faint chalk lines in it, then blown across them to teach the air how to flow. The dust that rose carried with it flecks of golden particles, refracting sunlight into shifting patterns like stained glass in motion. On Earth, climate scientists stared at the streams of data, uneasy. The winds were faint but precise, making Mars's thin sky behave like a fluid being stirred by an unseen spoon. They nicknamed it the architect of wind. Online, watchers posted animations of Mars wind lines forming glowing mandalas, hypnotic loops that pulsed in time with the comet's distant rhythm. Take a slow breath. Imagine standing in an empty stadium, feeling a single breeze circle the seats, round and round until the pattern becomes palpable. That's what the Martian atmosphere feels like now, a new nervous system laid over its thin bones. This choreography of air felt deliberate, preparatory, as if the red planet were being tuned like an instrument before a performance. Scientists whispered theories, fluid dynamics experiments, terraforming drafts, or something stranger. A planetary scale resonance test, using air as a bow across a string of rock. In the 8th week, Mars's surface temperatures edged upward by a fraction of a degree, too small for public headlines, but enough for instruments to register. Polar frost thinned slightly, exposing older, darker ice beneath. Tiny rivulets of CO2-rich vapor rose from pits and cracks, drifting upward to join the golden veil. For the first time, the red planet wasn't merely being rearranged, it was being warmed. Energy was being introduced, but gently, like a low flame under a frozen lake. The atmosphere's composition had shifted enough to trap a fraction more heat, and the winds spread it evenly across latitudes. Satellites caught time-lapse footage of Olympus Mons glowing faintly at dawn, not from lava, but from a thin skin of frost sublimating into vapor. Some claimed the mountain was smoking again, though no true eruption had occurred. The golden veil, thicker at higher altitudes, seemed to act like a radiant blanket, softening Mars' day-night extremes. Take another slow breath. Imagine a planet that has held its breath for eons, beginning to exhale mist into its own sky. That's Mars now, a world slowly, cautiously drawing in warmth, as if testing whether it can hold it. Speculation ran wild. Was 3I Atlas deliberately thawing subsurface reservoirs, creating microclimates, testing the red planet's ability to sustain a thicker atmosphere? In forums and late-night calls, a phrase appeared repeatedly: the warm-up phase. No one knew who coined it, but it stuck. And still, 3I Atlas hung overhead, golden filaments outstretched, silent. No messages, no explanations, only steady pulses through the solar wind, and a patient, deliberate reshaping of a world. The watchers, once skeptical, now spoke less and simply observed, like students at the edge of a blackboard, as the first lines of an equation appear, knowing more is coming, but not yet sure of the sum. By the 9th week, the tremors under Valles Marineris had evolved into something stranger: harmonics. Instruments on orbiters detected faint audio frequency waves propagating through the canyon walls. When converted to sound, they resembled a low choral hum, a drone echoing up and down the cliffs. Mars, it seemed, was starting to sing. At first, scientists thought it was wind resonance, but the pattern matched neither speed nor direction. It matched the pulse of 3I Atlas. The canyon floors, dotted with newly formed mineral lines, acted like a giant resonating chamber. The thin air carried the vibration upward, out through the golden veil. In Earth's observatories, researchers pressed headphones to their ears and listened live. It was eerie but beautiful, a sound like a faraway organ note or whale song, only slower, deeper, endlessly patient. Online communities uploaded spectrograms of the song, layering it over images of the comet. Some said the comet was playing Mars like an instrument. Others said Mars itself was awakening and answering back. Take a slow breath. Imagine standing at the bottom of a canyon so vast the sky is only a strip above you, and hearing the rock itself hum, not from wind, but from something inside the planet's bones. That's Mars now, a slow drone rising from its own crust, echoing an interstellar rhythm. The effect spread beyond Valles Marineris. Smaller fissures across Mars' surface began to exhibit the same harmonics. Each new note coincided with filament pulses from 3I Atlas, a call and response across millions of kilometers. The watchers began to speak of the duet between comet and planet. It was no longer a silent transformation. It had become a symphony, audible only to those who listened carefully. While the canyons hummed, the plains began to blush with new hues. Spectrographic imaging revealed subtle changes in the regolith. Dust, once uniformly iron oxide, began reflecting hints of copper, ochre, even faint emerald under certain angles of sunlight. No one could agree whether it was a mineralogical reaction or a biological one. The colors didn't match any known Martian compound. Orbiters caught images of strange glistening patches along crater rims. In some, crystalline structures sprouted like frost patterns, shimmering gold and green. In others, fine, hair-like filaments appeared to knit the surface dust together, vanishing by afternoon and reappearing at night. The red planet's monotone surface had started to sparkle with hidden threads. On Earth, the debate flared. Was this the beginning of life, seeded or awakened? Was it just exotic chemistry under new atmospheric conditions? No one had answers. But the images were unmistakable. Mars no longer looked purely red. Its surface had become an artist's palette in motion. Take another slow breath. Imagine walking across a tundra at dawn. Frost crystals, glowing colors no one has named yet, shifting under your feet. That's Mars now. A planetary skin responding like living tissue, colors emerging as if the world were dreaming itself awake. Meanwhile, 3I Atlas glided above, its filaments pulsing with the same calm rhythm. No sudden moves, no transmissions, just the steady golden light and the slow expansion of its influence. Whether it was terraforming, testing, or something else entirely, the transformation of Mars had entered a new phase. The watchers, once stunned into silence, began to write poetry, code, and prayer into their logs. This wasn't just science anymore. It was witnessing. By the 11th week, orbiters scanning below the Martian surface began to detect something long buried. Using radar pulses, researchers mapped massive structures beneath the regolith. Vast, arching chambers, some tens of kilometers across. These weren't mere lava tubes or ancient river channels. They were geometric, patterned, echoing the golden spirals etched on the surface above. The chambers appeared to light up under certain conditions, scattering radar like mirror flashes. Some showed traces of exotic elements, platinum, iridium, and complex silicates that matched no known meteorites, but matched fragments of 3I Atlas itself. It was as though the visitor had activated something dormant, drawing a skeleton of hidden architecture out of the red planet's memory. On Earth, archaeologists joined astronomers on the live streams, tracing comparisons to ancient star maps, to myths of sleeping giants beneath mountains. Online, the watchers spoke of the memory beneath the dust, as though Mars itself had been seeded ages ago, waiting for a trigger. Whether it was alien technology, lost natural structures, or something stranger, the effect was the same. Mars was revealing its underworld. Take a slow breath. Imagine standing on a plain while beneath your feet a city of light stirs, walls humming softly. That's Mars now. Not just transforming on the surface, but reaching upward from its hidden foundations like a seed pushing through soil. Meanwhile, 3i Atlas floated quietly above, golden filaments descending at intervals. No transmissions, no instructions, yet its presence alone seemed to draw the Martian underworld closer to the surface, hinting at a connection older than human memory. As the hidden structures pulsed below, the sky above Mars came alive. Pale gold and electric green auroras unfurled across the poles and then far beyond, curling like cosmic brushstrokes over canyons and mountains. Mars' magnetic field, once weak and fragmented, had strengthened slightly under the visitor's touch, enough to trap solar particles and ignite shimmering curtains of light. From orbit, the auroras looked like molten silk unrolling across the horizon. On Earth, telescopes caught them in infrared and ultraviolet, revealing nested rings and spirals echoing the golden lattice of 3i Atlas. The watchers were stunned. For the first time in millions of years, Mars wore a living sky. Take another slow breath. Imagine standing on a barren hilltop under thin air, and above you the heavens ripple with gold and emerald, whispering like wind in leaves. That's Mars now, a planet wearing a crown of light, hinting at a protective shield where once there was only emptiness. Speculation ran rampant. Had 3i Atlas revived Mars' magnetosphere artificially? Was this the first step toward shielding a newborn atmosphere? Or was the aurora itself the experiment, the planet's new nervous system flickering in visible wavelengths? No answers came, only the steady pulse from the comet and the slow thickening of Martian skies. Meanwhile, the watchers at home, insomniacs, astronomers, dreamers, leaned closer to their screens. Some moved to tears, others lulled into a kind of cosmic calm. Mars, once a frozen relic, now breathed light and hummed under their gaze. Something vast was happening, and they were awake to see it. By the 13th week, the patterns on Mars had grown too large, too deliberate to dismiss as coincidence. From orbit, the red planet's equatorial regions displayed vast spirals and hexagonal nodes, each linked by faint golden filaments visible at certain angles of sunlight. They resembled the circuitry of an impossibly large machine, or the growth rings of a colossal living organism. Every day the shapes sharpened, like a hand refining a sketch. When radar pulses probed the deeper strata, echoes returned with stunning symmetry, straight corridors, crosswise vaults, and vaulting arches under ancient basins. These weren't random lava tubes. They looked like a planetary blueprint revealed layer by layer. Geologists and engineers alike stared at the maps in stunned silence. It was as though 3i Atlas was redrafting Mars from the inside out. On Earth, forums overflowed with speculative models. Some showed how the hexagons could channel magnetic energy, others how the spirals could redistribute atmospheric flow. A few theorized these were not structures at all, but resonant patterns for sound, light, or gravity, like tuning forks embedded in stone. Take a slow breath. Picture Mars as a blank manuscript being filled with golden calligraphy, each line a note in a cosmic symphony. That's Mars now, no longer a static sphere, but an active composition, a living diagram playing out on planetary scale. And still 3i Atlas glided in its quiet orbit, filaments extended like invisible brushstrokes, the golden lattice a patient, unhurried architect drawing on a red canvas. As the surface blossomed with geometry, Mars's sky became heavier with unseen layers. Instruments recorded a slow but steady rise in atmospheric density, micrograms per cubic meter, but climbing week by week. The golden veil no longer appeared as mere mist, but as a semi-stable haze, refracting sunlight into halos and creating phantom suns above the horizon at dawn. Orbital spectrometers found nitrogen complexes binding to carbon dioxide, forming transient compounds that acted like microscopic sails, holding heavier molecules aloft. Mars was learning to keep its air, if only for a few hours longer each day. For the first time since its magnetosphere collapsed eons ago, the red planet showed a faint capacity for self-containment. At ground level, the changes would be subtle, a little more warmth, a little less ultraviolet radiation. But from orbit, the effect was striking. The thin sky now glowed faintly gold in infrared, like a planetary aura. The red planet no longer looked raw and empty. It was cocooning itself. Take another slow breath. Imagine a lung inflating cell by cell after centuries of collapse. That's Mars now, a tenuous breath returning, fragile yet deliberate, guided by something vast and patient hovering above. Scientists on Earth began debating whether this was the long-term goal, a trial run of atmospheric renewal, a prototype for a new world. Others suspected the process was temporary, a test of principles before some larger event, but none could deny the transformation. Mars had crossed a threshold from inert to dynamic. It was becoming a system again. And all the while, 3i Atlas drifted silently, a golden lantern above a red and gold planet, its filaments pulsing like the heartbeat of a patient experiment continuing just beyond human reach. By the 15th week, Mars had begun to act like a body inhaling. Data from orbiters showed that the planet's CO2 frost at dawn sublimated hours earlier than expected, as if the surface had warmed overnight under an invisible blanket. During the day, the haze of golden particles swelled upward, carrying heavier molecules into the sky. At night, it settled softly back to the surface, leaving faint, luminous traces like dew. Across the canyons and plains, delicate frost structures grew and melted in time with the comet's distant pulses. Some took on branching shapes, like vascular systems, reaching into the regolith. Others formed concentric ripples, as if Mars were exhaling through its own pores. The effect was subtle, silent, but visible from orbit in slow time-lapse, a planet breathing. On Earth, a quiet fascination settled over the watchers. Forum threads titled "Mars is Alive" sprouted overnight. Artists painted lungs of red rock with veins of gold, or sketched diagrams of an invisible organism spanning an entire world. Scientists spoke more cautiously, but could not deny the data. Mars's thin atmosphere was holding just a little longer, its daily swings narrowing like a fever breaking. Take a slow breath, imagine a desert stone warming under your hand, pulsing faintly as though alive. That's Mars now. Not a static world, but a slow, steady respiration echoing the rhythm of 3i Atlas above. No transmissions came, no craft descended, just the golden lattice gliding over the planet, filaments extended like tuning forks, coaxing a dead world to inhale again. The 16th week brought the first visible wells. In certain low-lying basins, circular depressions formed overnight, their edges ringed with shimmering dust. At dawn, thin plumes of vapor rose from these wells. Not geysers, but slow exhalations, as though deep reservoirs were venting under careful control. Instruments detected traces of water ice mixed with exotic salts, compounds that could lower freezing points and hold latent heat. From orbit, the wells looked like eyes opening in the desert, blinking under the golden haze. Some aligned with ancient riverbeds, others with the subterranean chambers mapped weeks earlier. Each seemed to act as a valve, releasing gases at intervals that matched the comet's pulses. The red planet, once sealed and frozen, now showed points of exchange between its hidden depths and its new sky. Speculation turned electric. Was 3I Atlas priming Mars' crust, stirring trapped volatiles to thicken its atmosphere? Was it testing the planet's capacity to hold water again? Some even imagined it as a biological act, the seeding of microbial life hidden in the vapor itself. No proof existed, but the imagery of golden wells breathing mist became an icon online, a sign that Mars had crossed into a new stage of transformation. Take another slow breath. Picture a frost-bound field slowly sprouting springs of warm water, vapor rising like a hymn at dawn. That's Mars now, a planet releasing what it had held for eons, its surface no longer inert but porous, open and dynamic. Through it all, 3I Atlas remained silent, a lantern in the night sky. It was less a comet now than a cosmic gardener, coaxing life from ancient soil, weaving air from stone, making a dead world a little less dead with each patient pulse. By the 17th week, the global pattern had shifted again. Orbiters reported faint electrical currents flowing along the golden lines etched into Mars' crust. These weren't random charges. They pulsed with a timing identical to 3I Atlas's distant rhythm. For the first time, scientists could model Mars as a circuit, with nodes, pathways, and flows of energy linking its ancient basins and newly formed wells. In some places, the crust glowed faintly in infrared at night, as though energy moved just beneath the surface. On Earth, observers began calling it the Martian network, not metaphorically, but literally, a system of channels conducting subtle pulses like a giant planetary nervous system. Tethered probes recorded microbursts of magnetic flux rising from the ground, then fading. When plotted on a map, the bursts formed intricate spirals around key geological points. The red planet had become a living diagram, a self-organizing grid tuned to an interstellar metronome. Take a slow breath. Imagine a city at night seen from orbit, each streetlight blinking in sequence, forming a pattern you can only see from far above. That's Mars now. A network lit not by bulbs, but by pulses traveling through stone and dust. And yet, for all the spectacle, no mechanism was visible. No drones, no ships, no machines on the surface. Just the slow, synchronized dance between a golden lattice overhead and the ancient rock beneath. During the 18th week, instruments on Mars orbiters detected something even more dramatic, a strengthening of the planet's residual magnetic field. For billions of years, Mars's magnetosphere had been weak, patchy, a ghost of its former self. Now, it pulsed faintly but steadily, expanding and contracting with each golden wave from 3I Atlas. The effect rippled across the entire solar-wind interaction zone. Auroras, once confined to the poles, shimmered at mid-latitudes. Charged particles spiraled more slowly into the atmosphere. In some regions, the golden veil thickened into ribbon-like streams, flickering as though a giant invisible loom were weaving magnetic threads into the sky. On Earth, magnetometers caught sympathetic pulses at exactly the same intervals. Scientists ran the data twice, then 3 times. The connection was undeniable. Mars was resonating, and its field was reaching out across space. Take another slow breath. Imagine a heart that had stopped long ago, giving one slow beat, then another, then finding its rhythm again. That's Mars now, a planetary pulse returning after an age of silence. Speculation exploded. Was 3I Atlas rebooting a planetary magnetosphere? Was this the ultimate goal of its mysterious terraforming? Or was Mars itself responding to some cosmic tide, using the comet only as a tuning fork? No answers came. But the evidence was there. A red world regaining a shield, breathing a little deeper, pulsing a little stronger with each passing day. And still above, 3i Atlas glided on, filaments extended, a golden teacher guiding a long-forgotten student back to life. The red planet's transformation had moved beyond the visible into the invisible, altering the forces that shape worlds. By the 19th week, the effects of 3i Atlas extended well beyond Mars itself. Instruments on orbiters began detecting strange harmonics in the charged particle environment between the red planet and Earth. It was as if an invisible tide now pulsed through interplanetary space, a soft current flowing along unseen lines. Mars had become a transmitter as much as a receiver. On the Martian surface, the golden lines grew brighter at night, glowing like veins under translucent skin. Dust devils, once random, now appeared and disappeared on cue, tracing loops over the same paths as though rehearsing a dance. Satellites recorded micro-auroras bursting directly above the golden wells before fading into the haze. On Earth, a quiet unease spread among the watchers. Magnetometers on our planet had begun to echo Mars' pulses. Tiny but measurable ripples in the field, like a drum struck far away but felt through the floor. The rhythm of 3i Atlas had begun to synchronize more than a world. It was synchronizing a system. Take a slow breath. Imagine a pebble dropped in a pond, ripples spreading outward until they touch every shore. That's the red planet now, its new heartbeat rippling across space, brushing the edges of our own atmosphere. Whether deliberate or incidental, the effect was unmistakable. Mars was no longer isolated. It was part of a larger, invisible network, and we were already inside it. By the 20th week, the transformation of Mars had reached a visible crescendo. The golden veil thickened to the point where sunrise and sunset glowed like molten copper, casting twin shadows across crater rims. Temperature maps showed gentle warming across both hemispheres. The golden wells exhaled mist at regular intervals, like valves on a living lung. Orbiters recorded a new phenomenon, thin golden arcs linking wells across vast distances, visible only under certain solar angles. When plotted, these arcs formed a web covering entire regions, a planetary-scale lattice echoing the comet's own. The red planet now resembled a glowing circuit board, its components linked in a shimmering network of light. On Earth, the watchers began to talk about the threshold. No one could define it, but everyone sensed it, a point of no return where the changes on Mars would become self-sustaining. Was this terraforming, a test, a rehearsal for Earth's own transformation, or something else, a signal we had yet to decode? Take another slow breath. Imagine a chrysalis swelling just before it breaks open, colors shifting inside. That's Mars now, a world poised at the edge of metamorphosis, its old self softening, its new self waiting to emerge. And still, above it all, 3i Atlas glided silently, filaments extended, a patient hand hovering above a canvas. It had not sped up or slowed down. It simply continued its rhythm, a cosmic metronome counting down to whatever came next. The watchers, entranced, leaned forward at their screens, knowing instinctively that the story had entered a new act. By the 21st week, the watchers on Earth had become as much a part of the story as the red planet itself. In dimly lit labs, spare bedrooms, and mountain observatories, they sat through the night with headphones, coffee cups, and silent screens. Data streamed in, wind patterns, magnetic pulses, spectral fingerprints of exotic gases. The numbers had begun to look like poetry, a language no one yet knew how to read. Mars's sky had deepened into a soft amber. Auroras arced as far as the tropics, curling over canyons like glowing rivers. The golden wells exhaled mist on a schedule so precise it resembled a heartbeat. And still, 3i Atlas hovered above, filaments poised, its golden lattice shimmering like a lantern suspended over a stage. Take a slow breath. Imagine the hush of an empty cathedral, light pouring through stained glass, time slowed to a pulse between heartbeats. That's the vigil now. Thousands of eyes on a world reshaping itself in silence, a collective holding of breath across oceans and time zones. Speculation had moved from science into myth. Some saw Mars as a rehearsal for Earth's future. Others whispered of tests, warnings, or invitations. But all agreed on one thing. The changes were no longer subtle. They had become a rhythm, a presence, a sense of expectation. During the 22nd week, something shifted in the data. When converted to sound, the pulses from Mars and 3I Atlas no longer formed two separate beats. They had merged, producing a single tone rising and falling in slow waves, the first true chord. Spectrographs displayed nested spirals within spirals, as though the comet and the planet were now a single instrument tuning itself. The auroras over Mars responded by brightening in sync with each crest of the new tone. For the first time, the golden veil above the poles flared bright enough to be visible to amateur astronomers on Earth with modest telescopes. Across social media, grainy videos of the glow went viral, splicing the red planet's horizon with pulses of gold and green. Take another slow breath. Imagine watching two dancers slowly find each other's rhythm until their steps merge into one, indistinguishable. That's Mars and 3I Atlas now. Not visitor and host, but a duet, a resonance spanning space itself. Inside control rooms, the watchers began to feel it too. A hum at the edge of hearing, a warmth in their hands as they touched keyboards, a sense of being watched back. Whether it was psychosomatic or real, no one could say. But the sense of a boundary, a veil, a threshold, was palpable. They were no longer merely studying Mars. They were standing at the edge of recognition, the moment before the lights turn on and the larger shape is revealed. And still, the comet gave no sign of intent. No message, no acceleration, only the steady weaving of light and field between itself and the red planet. Whatever this was building toward, the watchers knew they were inside it now, part of a pattern unfolding beyond their comprehension. By the 23rd week, the auroras above Mars had evolved into something more than light shows. When spectrographs analyzed their flicker, the data revealed a harmonic series, ratios nested like notes on a scale. The red planet's atmosphere was no longer just glowing, it was vibrating with structure, as though the air itself had become a musical instrument. Orbiters captured footage of shimmering rings expanding and contracting across the polar caps, synchronizing with pulses from 3I Atlas. Each ring seemed to imprint a faint pattern on the atmosphere below, redistributing dust and gases into subtle swirls. It resembled an invisible loom weaving a planetary tapestry. On Earth, linguists, physicists, and musicians formed working groups to study the patterns. Some overlaid the aurora harmonics with DNA sequences, others with planetary orbital periods. In each case, they found echoes, like a song hidden inside numbers. No one could explain why the ratios were so clean, so deliberate. Take a slow breath. Imagine standing beneath a dome of stained glass as sunlight pours through, each color vibrating with a tone you can almost hear. That's Mars now. Its sky a living instrument, its air humming with a golden chord. Speculation ran wild. Was the harmonic veil stabilizing Mars' new atmosphere? Was it a signal, a protective shield, or simply the byproduct of a deeper transformation? Whatever the answer, the red planet was no longer passive. It was participating, resonating, singing back. During the 24th week, a startling pattern emerged. High-resolution imaging showed that the golden lattice surrounding Mars was no longer symmetrical around the planet. It had shifted subtly, aligning with Earth's position in its orbit. Some scientists brushed it off as coincidence, but when overlaid with magnetometer data, the alignment was exact. In other words, Mars and 3i Atlas were not only resonating with each other, but also pointing at us. Inside Mission Control, this revelation spread like a quiet contagion. Screens flickered with models showing Earth's magnetic contours overlaid with Mars' new fields. The match was uncanny, as though the red planet had become a mirror, reflecting Earth's invisible patterns back at us. Take another slow breath. Imagine looking into a mirror and seeing not your own face, but a map of your heartbeat projected back. That's Mars now. A planet reflecting more than light, reflecting our own hidden fields. On forums, new theories bloomed. Was this a signal, a test, a call? Had 3i Atlas been sculpting Mars not just as a demonstration, but as a message, a template? No transmissions confirmed it, yet the sense of being drawn into a larger diagram was undeniable. Mars's sky continued to glow, its wells continued to breathe, and the golden lattice extended like a bridge between worlds. Whether it was an invitation or a warning, no one could say. But the watchers, leaning over their screens in dark rooms around the globe, felt the same chill of recognition. This was no longer only about Mars. The mirror was turning, and we were in its reflection. By the 25th week, the golden filaments descending from 3i Atlas no longer appeared as mere strands of light. They had thickened, braided into veins visible even to mid-sized amateur telescopes. Each vein stretched from the comet's halo toward Mars' magnetosphere, pulsing faintly like the slow contraction of living tissue. Orbiters documented the network, forming an elegant symmetry over both hemispheres. The veins arced and joined, crossing canyons, linking wells, weaving invisible bridges from pole to pole. Mars' magnetic field responded in kind, rippling outward with every pulse. In some images, the entire planet appeared wrapped in a translucent web, golden light flashing along its lines like signals racing down nerves. On Earth, the watchers were riveted. Computer models showed that each new vein connected regions of latent water ice to atmospheric pockets above, like capillaries feeding a lung. Others saw it as circuitry, a planetary motherboard being wired by an unseen hand. Either way, Mars was no longer a collection of isolated phenomena. It was a unified system. Take a slow breath. Imagine watching a tree's roots grow in time-lapse, reaching out into soil, searching for water, branching in deliberate patterns. That's Mars now, veins of light pulsing with unseen purpose, knitting its surface to its sky. Through it all, 3i Atlas floated overhead, silent and patient, a gardener or engineer or artist, reshaping a world with threads of gold. By the 26th week, strange effects began appearing on Earth's monitoring stations. Heart rate studies on sleep volunteers showed subtle synchronization with the comet's pulses when recordings of Mars were played back. Power grids displayed microfluctuations coinciding with filament pulses, small enough to dismiss as noise but persistent enough to plot. It was as though the rhythm building on Mars had begun to brush against our own invisible fields. Back on the red planet, the golden wells exhaled with unprecedented regularity, mist curling skyward like incense from 1,000 bowls. Auroras braided around the poles, their spirals echoing human fingerprint patterns. Even the dust storms shifted into looping patterns resembling Mandelbrot spirals, as though chaos itself were being organized into art. Take another slow breath. Imagine two pendulums swinging apart, slowly drawing into perfect synchrony until they move as one. That's Mars and Earth now. Not yet connected, but brushing fields, feeling for each other across the gulf. Speculation intensified. Was this mere resonance or intentional contact? Was 3i Atlas orchestrating a sympathetic vibration between planets, testing whether the red planet could transmit something to its blue neighbor? Scientists resisted sensationalism but couldn't ignore the timing. Each pulse matched both worlds' subtle tremors, like a metronome training dancers in separate rooms. And still, the golden lattice glowed in silence, its filaments arching between comet and planet like the strings of an instrument tuning itself before the first note. Mars had become a resonant body, and Earth, willingly or not, was starting to hum along. By the 27th week, the Martian rhythms had stabilized into something eerily precise. Orbiters reported that each pulse of the golden lattice matched a corresponding shift in wind, temperature, and magnetic field at exact intervals. Mars was no longer merely responding, it was keeping time. The red planet had become a metronome set to 3I Atlas's beat. On Earth, researchers began comparing their own biometric data while watching live streams. Heart rates, brainwave patterns, even breathing cycles subtly mirrored the cadence of the comet's pulses. No one knew whether it was psychosomatic or physical resonance, but the numbers didn't lie. Meanwhile, Mars's skies looked increasingly alive. Dust and mist braided into long filaments, auroras spiraled from poles to mid-latitudes, and the golden wells exhaled in a heartbeat rhythm so steady it felt rehearsed. The entire planet had entered a dance of slow, measured movement, a choreography guided by an unseen composer. Take a slow breath. Imagine two clocks across a room, ticking out of sync, slowly sliding into unison until they tick as one. That's Mars and 3II Atlas now, and somewhere across the Gulf, Earth is beginning to hear the same rhythm. In control rooms and basements, watchers typed fewer words and simply stared at the glow on their screens, breathing with it. A strange calm settled, as if the whole planet were leaning toward a lullaby sung from millions of kilometers away. By the 28th week, a new phenomenon emerged. A bright, steady glow at the very heart of 3I Atlas's lattice. Observers had long called it the lantern, but now it intensified, a soft sphere of gold pulsing with deep, slow waves. With each pulse, Mars' auroras brightened, and its wells breathed a little more mist, like lungs inhaling under a guiding hand. Orbiters caught images of the lantern projecting faint geometric shadows onto the Martian atmosphere. Triangles, spirals, and interlocking circles rippling across the thin air. At ground level, those shadows aligned with the patterns etched into the crust, as though the comet were printing designs directly onto the planet from above. On Earth, speculation reached a fever pitch. Was the lantern the core of 3I Atlas, an engine or a seed or an eye? Was it preparing Mars for a final transformation, or simply revealing its inner structure after months of cloaking? No answers came, only the steady radiance of the lantern and the rising sense of anticipation. Take another slow breath. Imagine a vast cathedral dim for hours, then at last a single candle at the altar, flaring bright enough to reveal the architecture. That's Mars now, a planet illuminated from above, every secret line thrown into relief by a patient hand. Across forums and news outlets, a new phrase spread: the quiet before the signal. People sensed a shift coming, a turn in the story. Mars had been prepared, shaped, tuned. The lantern was now bright enough to be seen in daylight on high-orbit images. Something was about to happen. By the 29th week, Mars seemed to hold its breath. The winds slowed, the auroras dimmed, and the golden wells exhaled mist at longer intervals. Even the lantern at 3I Atlas's core became steady, no longer pulsing but glowing with an unwavering light. Scientists called it the pause, a planetary stillness that felt like the moment before a bell tolls. Orbiters detected minute changes in the electromagnetic field above the red planet. Not fluctuations, but a flattening, as though two waves had merged perfectly into one and then gone silent. The result was an eerie calm, a suspended state neither growing nor fading. On Earth, the watchers felt it too. Streams they had followed for months showed nothing but flat lines and faint background hiss. Yet the absence itself felt charged, like a hush falling over an audience before the curtain rises. Social media filled with the phrase, "the breath before the note." Even skeptics admitted that something was different. Take a slow breath. Imagine walking into a cathedral where the choir has just inhaled together, lungs full, mouths open, waiting to release the first chord. That's Mars now, a world poised, drawn back like a bowstring, holding potential energy in silence. Speculation turned electric. Was this the transition point, the final calibration, a prelude to contact? No signals came, no flashes, no transmissions, only the stillness spreading from Mars across the magnetic fields of space like a ripple frozen in ice. Segment 30. The first flicker of answer. 450 words. Then, on the first day of the 30th week, it happened. The lantern at 3i Atlas's center flickered once. A deep, slow flash, like a heartbeat restarting after a long pause. Mars's auroras brightened instantly, the golden wells vented a thin plume of mist, and orbiters recorded a surge of exotic particles streaming from the comet toward the planet. The surge was brief but precise, a pulse lasting just over 9 seconds. Instruments detected harmonic overtones embedded in the wave, frequencies that matched those mapped in the Martian crust. It was as though the comet had struck a tuning fork, and the red planet resonated in reply. On Earth, the watchers heard it as a low, rolling tone when converted to sound, a note so deep it seemed to vibrate in their bones. Some described it as the sound of distant thunder, others as a whale calling across a trench. Whatever it was, it marked the first clear signal, not just a pattern or a change, but an event. Take another slow breath. Imagine a vast room where someone finally plays the first note of a long-awaited symphony. That's Mars now, a chord struck across a planetary instrument, the first flicker of a melody we cannot yet comprehend. The pulse faded and the lantern dimmed, but Mars did not return to its previous state. Its auroras held their brightness, its wells continued to breathe at new intervals, and the watchers leaned forward at their screens, realizing that the story had shifted. This was no longer only a transformation, it was an opening. By the 31st week, the single deep tone that had flickered out of 3i Atlas began to evolve. Orbiters recorded overtones rippling through the Martian atmosphere, nested frequencies forming chords rather than simple pulses. When converted to audio, the sound resembled an immense choir singing at the edge of audibility, a resonant hum layered with hidden intervals. On the ground, the golden wells responded with faint plumes at each harmonic crest. Auroras above Mars flickered in perfect time, each flare corresponding to a specific overtone, as though the sky itself were a score being played. Scientists began mapping the harmonics across latitude and longitude, discovering that each note aligned with a geographical feature etched in the crust. On Earth, linguists joined the analysis. They found repeating structures in the frequency spectra, ratios echoing ancient musical scales, orbital periods, even the Fibonacci sequence. Was it intentional or simply the mathematics of resonance? No one knew. But the pattern was undeniable. Take a slow breath. Imagine a cathedral organ warming up, one note swelling into a chord, filling every corner of the hall. That's Mars now, no longer just pulsing but singing, a world vibrating in harmony with an unseen composer. Forums and late-night channels buzzed with speculation. Was this communication, calibration, a planetary-scale instrument preparing for something beyond comprehension? The watchers, lulled by weeks of steady rhythm, felt themselves pulled deeper into a trance, the comet's song a soft gravity tugging at their thoughts. As the harmonics deepened, the patterns etched into Mars' crust began to change shape. Satellite images showed hexagons stretching into spirals, spirals blossoming into starbursts. The geometry wasn't random. It unfolded in stages, like origami being uncreased to reveal a hidden picture. When overlaid with the comet's own lattice, the match was uncanny. Two systems unfolding the same blueprint across space. Orbital radar penetrated deeper into the crust, revealing new tunnels forming in real time. Some chambers appeared to braid together, connecting older voids into vast, interlaced caverns. The process resembled roots weaving through soil, connecting isolated pockets into a single network. On Earth, mathematicians animated the shapes, discovering a progression, from simple polygons to complex fractals, then to something resembling an 8-pointed star. The transformation was too orderly to be geological chance. It was as if 3i Atlas were teaching Mars to open, peeling back layers to reveal its inner architecture. Take another slow breath. Imagine a paper lantern unfolding, petals spreading outward, revealing a light inside. That's Mars now, a planet opening itself to the sky, guided by the golden threads of an unseen hand. Speculation turned mystical. Was this a map, a warning, a ritual, or was it merely physics, resonance sculpting matter into forms that echoed cosmic principles? No one could answer, but everyone could see the unfolding geometry. Mars was no longer a dead world. It was becoming a living diagram, a work in progress written across dust, rock, and sky. And above it all, 3i Atlas hovered silently, filaments extended, the lantern at its core glowing brighter with each passing day, as if preparing for the next movement in its cosmic composition. By the 33rd week, a subtle but pervasive shift occurred, not on Mars, but within the people who had been watching it. Around the world, thousands of amateur astronomers, data analysts, and night shift scientists reported vivid dreams of walking across Martian landscapes lit with golden light. They described canyons singing like organs, wells breathing like lungs, and auroras curling into stairways above their heads. Forums began tracking these dreams as if they were data. Strangers from different continents posted nearly identical imagery, even down to specific colors and shapes. Statisticians tried to prove it was coincidence but found correlations that defied chance. The watchers were beginning to mirror Mars the way Mars mirrored 3i Atlas. Meanwhile, on the red planet, the auroras became more intricate, the golden wells more synchronized, the filament pulses steadier. Some observers theorized that the dream contagion was simply psychological, the effect of collective obsession. Others suspected a subtler resonance at work, frequencies from 3i Atlas passing through Mars and into the human nervous system. Take a slow breath. Imagine watching a campfire for so long that even with your eyes closed, you still see its flicker. That's the watchers now. Minds imprinted with the golden patterns of a distant world, carrying a piece of Mars inside their sleep. The line between observation and participation was blurring. Mars was no longer simply a subject. It was becoming an experience, a shared dream weaving itself across millions of minds. By the 34th week, Mars sent back a new spectacle. The auroras above the planet's equator flared into complex patterns, spirals morphing into glyphs, shapes that resembled ideograms more than weather. These weren't static. They shimmered, repeated, inverted, then faded, only to reappear at new coordinates hours later. Satellite footage showed these glyphs aligning with surface formations, as though sky and crust were communicating. Some matched human symbols accidentally, the infinity loop, a spiral galaxy, even a shape eerily similar to a human fingerprint. The internet lit up with speculation. Was this finally communication, a visible language, Or just our own pattern-seeking minds overinterpreting coincidence? On Earth, linguists and cryptographers worked feverishly, layering the glyph patterns over the harmonics of 3i Atlas's pulses. The ratios were precise, fractal and recursive. They behaved like a syntax, not a random scatter. Yet no one could translate the meaning. Take another slow breath. Imagine two mirrors angled toward each other, reflections repeating to infinity until the boundary between them dissolves. That's Mars now, its crust and sky reflecting each other, glyphs forming as though a sentence is about to be written. For the watchers, the sense of imminence grew stronger. Even skeptics whispered that something had shifted. Mars and 3i Atlas were no longer just phenomena, they were becoming a dialogue. Whether we could understand it or not, a message seemed to be taking shape in dust and light. By the 35th week, the entire system seemed to pause again. The glyphs over Mars dimmed, the auroras thinned to pale threads. Even the wells breathed more slowly, as if the planet had settled into a meditative state. Instruments recorded an almost total drop in seismic tremors and electromagnetic surges, a lull in the song, a rest between measures. On Earth, this quiet registered like a missing heartbeat. Watchers who had grown accustomed to the nightly pulses described a sensation of absence, a stillness that felt louder than sound. Forums filled with messages of unease. "It's too quiet" became the most upvoted phrase of the week. Orbiters confirmed that the golden lattice of 3i Atlas had shifted subtly, its filaments coiling inward as though gathering strength. The lantern at its center dimmed to a soft ember, steady but muted. The red planet floated beneath a canopy of silence. Take a slow breath. Imagine a symphony orchestra lifting bows off strings, holding the silence, the hall echoing with anticipation. That's Mars now, a world that has exhaled, waiting for its next inhale. Speculation erupted. Was this the end of the transformation? A cooling-off period, or the prelude to a final stage? No answers, no transmissions, only the waiting glow of a golden network suspended over a hushed planet. Then, in the 36th week, new readings emerged from deep beneath Mars' crust. Gravimetric sensors picked up minute changes, a redistribution of mass as though underground chambers had shifted. Temperatures in certain regions rose by fractions of a degree. Magnetometers on orbiters detected a subtle twist in field lines, spiraling inward toward the planet's center. At the same time, the auroras at the poles flickered briefly, like eyelids opening and closing. The wells resumed their exhalations, but at a new interval, slower, deeper, resonant with a lower frequency. The red planet's breathing had changed key. On Earth, geophysicists modeled the data and found something astonishing. The patterns resembled the magnetic dynamo of a living planet, as though Mars were trying to restart a process long dormant. It wasn't just atmosphere or surface now. It was the core, the heart of the world, responding to 3i Atlas's influence. Take another slow breath. Imagine standing over a long-extinct volcano and feeling a tremor beneath your feet, faint warmth rising through cold stone. That's Mars now, a planet stirring from its deepest slumber, hinting at motion at its very center. Speculation reached a fever pitch. Was 3i Atlas rebuilding Mars's dynamo, preparing it for a permanent magnetosphere? Was the comet itself the seed of a process designed to awaken dead worlds? The idea sounded like myth, but the data did not lie. The red planet was no longer a static sphere of rock. Something vast and quiet was moving within, and above, 3i Atlas glowed faintly, its filaments re-extending, patient as ever, a cosmic hand reaching toward a pulse just beneath a red surface. By the 37th week, new high-resolution imaging from orbiters revealed something breathtaking. The golden lattice above Mars was no longer a simple grid. It had evolved into a double spiral, two counter-rotating arms winding out from a central point above the equator. Below, matching patterns appeared in the dust and stone, vast curving ridges mirroring the lattice overhead. Scientists had seen spirals before, in galaxies, seashells, weather systems, but never in a synchronized structure spanning a planet and a comet simultaneously. The double spiral pulsed with alternating waves of light, creating a slow, hypnotic flicker, visible even to small backyard telescopes on Earth. On Mars, the auroras followed suit, curling into overlapping arcs that rose and fell in time with the spirals. The golden wells exhaled vapor at staggered intervals, producing a rhythm like interlocking breaths. It was as if the red planet had been tuned into a cosmic whirlpool. Take a slow breath. Imagine standing on a plane as two cyclones form above you in perfect mirror motion, their arms of light weaving an invisible loom across the sky. That's Mars now, a living diagram of motion, its surface and sky dancing to the same spiral. On Earth, watchers began to speak of the helix, a turning point where two streams of force converged. Whether it was energy, information, or something else entirely, no one could deny the symmetry. By the 38th week, a thin, faint filament of light appeared to stretch from the outer edge of 3I Atlas's double spiral toward interplanetary space. At first, it was written off as an imaging artifact, but within days it brightened just enough to track. It was a thread, white gold and narrow, extending out in the general direction of Earth's orbit. Spectrometers on orbiters found nothing material there, only a low-energy field, like a standing wave frozen in vacuum. Yet the geometry matched the double spiral above Mars and the patterns etched into its crust. Some scientists speculated it was a conduit, a test beam, or a resonance path linking Mars to its neighboring worlds. Take another slow breath. Imagine a spider casting a single thread across a gap before it builds its web. That's 3I Atlas now, extending a filament from its dance with Mars toward a wider stage. On Earth, the idea sparked a mix of awe and dread. Was this the beginning of contact or expansion? Would the thread connect directly to our own planet, our own magnetosphere? No one knew. But the sense of a bridge forming across space, invisible yet potent, began to haunt the watchers' nights. Meanwhile, Mars itself seemed unaffected by the new extension. Its spirals continued, its wells breathed, its auroras glowed, but the presence of that single filament reaching outward gave the story a new dimension. Not only was Mars transforming, but the influence of 3I Atlas might now be preparing to step beyond it. By the 39th week, the faint filament reaching outward from 3I Atlas was no longer a simple ray. High-resolution imaging showed subtle pulses running along it like signals down a wire. The pulses were faint, but timed precisely with Mars' own magnetic surges, as if information or energy were flowing between the two bodies. On the Martian surface, nothing catastrophic occurred. No eruptions, no sudden upheavals, only a deepening of patterns already in place. The double spiral overhead slowed slightly. The golden wells exhaled mist with longer pauses, and the auroras began to flicker at new intervals. The entire system had entered a kind of handshake, a steady, deliberate exchange rather than a one-way transformation. On Earth, magnetometers picked up sympathetic oscillations at the same frequency. Power grids showed tiny synchronized flickers. Watchers began to feel as though something vast and patient had reached out a hand, placing its palm gently against our own invisible fields. Take a slow breath. Imagine standing at the edge of a dark lake, extending your hand, and feeling a pressureless touch from beneath the water. Not a grab, but a greeting. That's Mars now, and perhaps Earth too, a soft handshake across millions of kilometers. Forums filled with diagrams of the filament, speculating about what was traveling along it. Data, energy, or simply a test pulse to measure resonance between worlds. Whatever it was, the red planet no longer seemed an isolated experiment. It felt like the first node in a much larger network. In the 40th week, the pulses along the filament changed cadence, adopting a rhythm reminiscent of human breathing, a slow inhale, a held pause, a slow exhale. Instruments on Mars orbiters recorded corresponding fluctuations in the planet's atmosphere, pressure rising and falling in near-perfect synchrony. It was as though Mars itself had been taught to breathe, and now the teacher was breathing with it. Auroras over Mars developed layered curtains that moved like lung tissue, expanding and contracting. Golden mist above the wells thickened at each inhale, then thinned at each exhale. Even the dust storms seemed to obey the new cycle, swirling during peaks and calming during troughs. Take another slow breath. Imagine a vast organism taking its first conscious inhalation, lungs expanding after a lifetime of dormancy. That's Mars now, a world not only reshaped, but rhythmically alive, pulsing with a breath it did not generate alone. On Earth, the watchers noticed their own bodies sinking unconsciously. In live stream chats, people reported slowing their breathing to match the data pulses. "It feels like meditation," one wrote. "Like something huge is breathing with me," said another. The boundary between observer and observed blurred a little further. Speculation swirled. Was this the culmination of the terraforming, or a preparatory step before something entirely new? Was 3i Atlas rehearsing a signal to be sent across the filament, or simply stabilizing a newly awakened world? No one knew. But the breath between pulses, steady and deep, filled the solar system with a new kind of waiting. Not silence, but anticipation. By the 41st week, orbiters detected new formations in the Martian crust, circular depressions ringed with faint golden ridges, scattered across the equatorial regions like a constellation turned inside out. From above, they resembled eyes, each one reflecting the golden auroras above. Inside the circles, sensors measured tiny electromagnetic vortices spinning in harmony with the filament pulses. Scientists debated whether these were simple surface changes or a distributed array of some sort, resonant nodes amplifying the comet's influence. In online forums, the watchers began calling them the network of eyes, as if Mars itself had opened a planetary vision to gaze outward across space. Above, the double spiral of 3i Atlas mirrored these circles with flickers of its own, pulses racing between arms, filaments tightening like the muscles of an iris. And still no overt message appeared, only a growing sense of structure, symmetry, and purpose. Take a slow breath. Imagine standing in a dark room where dozens of eyes have just opened around you, not in menace but in quiet attention. That's Mars now, a world no longer simply transforming but aware, its new systems arranged like a field of perception. Speculation ran wild. Were these eyes sensors, stabilizers, or simply byproducts of complex chemistry? Or was the red planet itself becoming a new kind of organism, knitting sensory nodes into its skin? No one could say. But the shapes were unmistakable, visible even to small telescopes on Earth under the right conditions. A planet staring back. During the 42nd week, another subtle shift was measured. Mars' axial tilt. Not dramatic, but detectable. A fraction of a degree over several days. This was far too rapid for normal planetary mechanics. Astronomers checked their calculations again and again, but the numbers held. Mars had subtly leaned. The tilt was small enough not to trigger catastrophic effects, yet large enough to redistribute solar energy across the hemispheres. Polar frost began sublimating at new rates, winds altered their patterns, and the auroras shifted slightly, aligning with fresh geometries in the sky. It was as if the entire world had been nudged to a new angle to catch a different kind of light. On Earth, this news sent shockwaves through scientific communities. Was 3i Atlas exerting gravitational influence, using some unknown mechanism to reposition Mars? Or had the internal mass redistributions under the crust caused the change themselves? Theories multiplied, but none fit the precision of the observed tilt. Take another slow breath. Imagine adjusting a telescope by the tiniest fraction until a blurry image snaps into perfect focus. That's Mars now, a planet tilted like a lens, aligned to a new view. The watchers sensed the change even before the data arrived. Livestream chats filled with posts about feeling a shift, a new pressure in the room, as if some vast frame had clicked into place. Whether psychosomatic or real, the sense of recalibration was undeniable. The red planet had moved, and with it, perhaps, the story. And above, 3i Atlas hovered silently, filaments taut, the lantern at its core glowing like an eye that had finally focused. By the 43rd week, the slight axial tilt combined with the golden veil to create a new optical effect. Telescopes on Earth recorded sunlight bending through Mars' atmosphere in a way no model had predicted. The red planet now acted like a giant lens, refracting solar rays into concentric rings, visible even in deep space imaging. Some rings extended hundreds of kilometers into space, thin but coherent, shimmering arcs of gold and copper. Orbiters detected these arcs focusing toward a point just above the planet's equator, precisely where 3i Atlas hovered. The comet's lattice responded with subtle flickers, as though the rings were feeding it energy or information. It was no longer clear which body was shaping which. They had become one optical system, a vast interplanetary instrument. On Earth, astrophysicists debated whether this was gravitational lensing, refractive optics, or some unknown physics. The watchers, meanwhile, simply stared at the images, mesmerized by the slow formation of rings across a once empty sky. Take a slow breath. Imagine holding a crystal up to sunlight, seeing rainbows refracted onto your walls. Only now the crystal is an entire world. That's Mars now, a planet acting as a lens, catching starlight and bending it towards something waiting above. Speculation bubbled. Was 3i Atlas preparing a signal to be sent outward? Was the red planet being turned into a transmitter, a lighthouse, a cosmic telescope? Whatever the purpose, the imagery was undeniable. Mars had become an optic, a tool, a shimmering eye looking into the void. During the 44th week, the long silence broke. Instruments tuned to the background hiss of space suddenly picked up a low, structured hum, not random noise, but a slow sequence of tones rising and falling like a breath drawn over a cello string. When plotted, the frequencies matched the new arcs forming above Mars. It was as if the planet itself had begun to speak, using the lens of its atmosphere to modulate waves traveling from 3i Atlas. On Earth, the watchers converted the signals to sound and played them back. The result was haunting, a soft, rolling whisper like wind across a cavern mouth. People described feeling it not only in their ears, but in their chest, a resonance that stirred the ribs. Take another slow breath. Imagine a seashell held to your ear, the ocean's roar encoded inside. That's Mars now, a whispering world carrying a tone across space, speaking without words. Scientists scrambled to decode the pattern, but it resisted translation. The ratios matched no known code, yet repeated with clockwork precision. Some likened it to a call and response between Mars and the comet, others to the tuning of an instrument before a concert. Whatever it was, the whisper's return signaled that the pause was over and a new phase had begun. And still above, 3i Atlas glowed, filaments taut, lantern burning brighter, as if waiting for us to lean closer, to listen more carefully, to understand what it was teaching a red world to become. By the 45th week, the golden wells on Mars had transformed yet again. What were once faint exhalations became steady shafts of light, rising like ghostly columns into the thin atmosphere. Orbiters recorded the beams as coherent, slightly luminous, flickering in synchrony with the comet's pulses. From the surface, they would have looked like pale auroral pillars, stretching skyward from crater floors and canyon beds. The beams converged with the auroras overhead, threading directly into the lattice of 3I Atlas. It was as though the planet had grown a forest of golden stalks, each one a conduit feeding or receiving energy from above. Spectral analysis showed the columns carrying complex, layered harmonics, a vertical extension of the patterns first seen in the air and dust months earlier. On Earth, the watchers were transfixed. Amateur astronomers posted shaky videos showing Mars dotted with glowing needles, like candles burning on a dark altar. Scientists debated whether the beams were optical illusions, electromagnetic discharges, or something entirely new, some mechanism of vertical coupling between ground and sky. Take a slow breath. Imagine standing on a plane at night while hundreds of columns of faint light rise around you, each humming like a soft wire. That's Mars now, a planet sending up tendrils of illumination, connecting its hidden depths to the comet's hovering lattice. By the 46th week, all the disparate elements, spirals, wells, auroras, filaments, began to align toward a single point directly beneath 3I Atlas's lantern. Orbiters mapped the converging patterns. Every golden thread and harmonic pulse now fed into a zone at Mars's equator, a circular basin glowing faintly like the pupil of a giant eye. The auroras focused above it, forming nested rings that rose like inverted cones into the sky. The wells timed their exhalations to the same beat, sending mist upward in concentric waves. Even the double spiral overhead slowed its rotation, arms curling inward as though the entire system were tightening into focus. On Earth, the watchers spoke of the gathering, a planetary-scale choreography collapsing into a single gesture. Data models showed energy densities peaking over the basin, a gentle build-up like a tide drawing back before a wave. The comet's lantern pulsed brighter, its filaments vibrating with deep, slow ripples. Take another slow breath. Imagine watching a giant spiderweb tremble as its strands tighten, all converging toward the center where something waits. That's Mars now, a planet folding its patterns inward, preparing for whatever comes next. Speculation soared. Was this the moment of activation, communication, or simply stabilization? No answers came, but the sense of climax grew undeniable. After months of transformation, the red planet was now a single resonant instrument tuned to a single point, a cosmic lens aimed at an unseen horizon. By the 47th week, the equatorial basin beneath 3I Atlas had become a vast hollow of light. Orbiters recorded the glow spreading outwards at ground level, creeping like frost, but radiating gold rather than white. The wells surrounding it pulsed in synchrony, feeding vapor inward toward the center. From above, it looked like a planetary mandala, concentric rings converging on a single radiant hub. Spectrometers showed the glow reaching deeper into the crust, not just lighting the surface but penetrating kilometers down. Temperatures around the basin rose fractionally. Subtle tremors suggested cavities expanding below, as if the planet's internal architecture were being reconfigured. It was no longer just patterns on top. Something was changing inside. On Earth, the watchers compared time-lapse images and saw the glow brighten at exactly the same times Earth's own magnetosphere twitched, subtle, coordinated echoes across space. Whether psychosomatic or physical, the effect felt undeniable. The red planet's new heartbeat was beginning to tug at our own. Take a slow breath. Imagine standing in a dark auditorium as the stage lights slowly rise, revealing not just a stage, but a door at the back opening into something brighter. That's Mars now, a hollow glow expanding at its center, hinting at a hidden interior coming to life. Forums buzzed with the phrase, "the womb of Mars," speculation that the basin was becoming a cradle for something unprecedented, energy, life, or a message yet to be unveiled. Then, in the 48th week, the glow at the center of the basin condensed into a single, brilliant point. Orbiters caught the moment in high resolution, a column of golden light shooting straight upward from the surface to the lantern at 3I Atlas's core. For the first time since the comet's arrival, there was no mistaking it. Mars and the comet were directly linked by a visible conduit. Around the column, the auroras spiraled inward, forming a vast pupil-like structure above the basin. The double spiral overhead slowed, arms locking into symmetry like the iris of an eye adjusting to light. Even the golden wells across the planet timed their exhalations to the column's rhythm, each pulse sending ripples toward the center. On Earth, the watchers were stunned. The eye opens trended across every platform. People described feeling a pressure in their chests, a warmth in their palms, a sense of being gazed at from across the gulf. Whether coincidence or resonance, the moment felt personal, intimate, as though the red planet and its interstellar tutor had turned to look directly at us. Take another slow breath. Imagine a curtain pulled back to reveal a single immense eye staring outward, not in menace, but in recognition. That's Mars now, a world no longer just shaped but awakened, looking up through a golden thread to the teacher hovering above. Speculation erupted. Was this the culmination? A signal ready to be sent? A portal? Or merely the first blink of something far vaster than we could imagine? No answers yet, but the red planet had become a living lens, a golden pupil aimed at the void. By the 49th week, the golden column linking Mars and 3I Atlas had thickened into a luminous funnel. Orbiters recorded oscillations running up and down its length, nested frequencies stacked like rungs on a ladder. Spectrographs showed pulses at harmonics long theorized but never detected in natural astrophysical sources. The entire system, comet, lattice, planet, now behaved like one vast antenna. On Mars, the auroras brightened and began to twist into braided cords around the column. The golden wells vented mist in perfect waves, their timing so precise it resembled digital encoding. The red planet was no longer just a canvas, it had become a transmitter. On Earth, antennas listening to the background hiss of space registered a new pattern. A low, rising hum swelled into layered tones, faint but coherent, matching the pulses racing up and down the golden funnel. For the first time, analysts could trace a direct cause and effect. The column pulsed, the auroras flared, and Earth's instruments registered a corresponding wave seconds later. Take a slow breath. Imagine standing in a quiet room as a string on a distant instrument is plucked and the vibration travels invisibly to your ear. That's the solar system now, a chord struck across two worlds, resonating in the space between. Speculation erupted. Was the funnel a message, an energy conduit, or a bridge? Was this the culmination of a months-long planetary-scale experiment? No one knew, but everyone sensed it. The system was about to do something it hadn't done before. In the 50th week, the funnel brightened until it outshone Mars' own dawn. Orbiters documented the entire column as a glowing spire reaching from the red planet's surface to the comet's heart. Within it, subtle flickers danced like characters on a scroll, too fast for the naked eye but clear in slow-motion playback. Mars' auroras froze in place, holding their shape like curtains drawn wide. The golden wells ceased their mist entirely, going still for the first time in months. Even the double spiral overhead stopped rotating, locking into a perfect, symmetrical geometry. The entire system had gone silent and steady, a vast instrument poised before its first deliberate note. On Earth, the watchers leaned toward their screens as one. Magnetometers trembled with faint oscillations. Power grids flickered in microbursts. People reported feeling a low vibration at the base of their skulls, a hush settling over their rooms as though the air itself had thickened. The solar system was holding its breath. Take another slow breath. Imagine a cathedral after months of tuning the organ, pipes gleaming, bellows filled, the organist's fingers hovering above the keys. That's Mars and 3I Atlas now. The entire structure poised, silent, waiting to release a sound that could change everything. Speculation had narrowed to a single question. Would the next pulse be a transmission, a transformation, a signal to Earth, or something no one could predict? The watchers could only wait, suspended between awe and apprehension, their lives synced to a golden funnel stretching across millions of kilometers. By the 51st week, the silence broke. A surge of light erupted up the golden funnel, cascading from Mars to 3I Atlas like a reversed lightning strike in slow motion. Instruments on orbiters flared with overload warnings. Spectrographs lit with bands no one had ever catalogued. The pulse lasted 30 seconds but seemed to stretch into eternity, a long, rising tone sweeping across the solar wind. On the red planet, the auroras inverted their colors, flipping from gold and green to violet and blue. The golden wells, frozen for days, vented plumes like geysers, releasing glittering particles into the air. Even the crust glowed faintly, its etched spirals emitting a low infrared signature like a vast circuit heating under current. On Earth, antennas caught the pulse and converted it to sound, a shimmering chord layered with harmonics, building from the deepest sub-bass to a high crystalline note that faded like breath on glass. People described feeling it in their bodies, a warmth at the base of the skull, a tremor in the chest. Some said it felt like an enormous door unlocking far away. Take a slow breath. Imagine standing on a mountain as dawn breaks and a wave of light rolls upward, touching every peak at once. That's Mars now, a planet releasing what it had built up for months, sending its first full breath into space. Speculation exploded. Was this the transmission, a proof of concept, or the moment Mars ceased to be only a world and became an active node in a cosmic network? No one could say. But the surge marked a turning point. The months of preparation had finally produced action. Within hours of the golden surge, subtle effects rippled across Earth. Magnetometers registered synchronous pulses. Auroras at high latitudes flickered faintly gold for the first time in recorded history. Even the ionosphere showed a brief, measurable shimmer. The echo had reached us. In living rooms and labs, watchers stared at their instruments in disbelief. Some reported dreams of standing on Martian soil under a violet sky. Others described hearing a tone at the edge of perception, a soft vibration behind everyday noise. Whether psychosomatic or physical, the impression was unmistakable. Earth had felt something. Take another slow breath. Imagine two tuning forks across a room, one struck hard, the other singing without touch. That's Earth now, a planet resonating faintly to a chord struck millions of kilometers away. On Mars, the golden funnel dimmed, but did not disappear. Its structure remained, filaments quivering like strings after a pluck. The auroras, now mixed with violet, settled into a new rhythm. The wells breathed again, slower but deeper, as though a new phase had begun. Speculation narrowed to a single theme: contact. Was the surge a greeting, a test, or a trigger? Had 3I Atlas simply taught Mars to sing, or had it sent something, data, life, a message, along the golden funnel toward the blue world next door? No answers yet. Only the echo shimmering across our skies, hinting that the experiment on Mars had always included us. By the 53rd week, the echo between Mars and Earth had strengthened. Instruments showed subtle but persistent synchrony across magnetospheres, as if both planets were now vibrating in a shared chord. Mars's auroras pulsed violet and gold. Earth's high-latitude lights flickered in ghostly echoes, invisible to the naked eye but clear on sensitive detectors. On Mars, the golden funnel steadied into a constant glow, no longer erupting in surges but humming with a low, continuous tone. Its harmonics matched frequencies measured in our own upper atmosphere, as though the two worlds had become linked tuning forks ringing in space. Take a slow breath. Imagine a long suspension bridge swaying gently as cars pass, its cables moving in subtle synchrony. That's Mars and Earth now. Two worlds joined by a vibration, not yet visible but felt as a soft tremor across the solar wind. Watchers around the globe began to experience shared phenomena. Dreams of two skies merging, of golden filaments arcing over oceans. People who had never met posted nearly identical sketches online. Arcs, spirals, and nested circles. Whether coincidence or not, the sense of connection had transcended science and moved into culture, myth, and private experience. Meanwhile, 3i Atlas maintained its quiet vigil, lantern bright but steady, filaments extended like threads of a loom weaving an invisible fabric between planets. During the 54th week, telescopes captured something extraordinary. Faint filaments extending not only toward Earth but toward other bodies in the solar system. Jupiter, Venus, even the asteroid belt. They were faint at first, like scratches on a photograph, but within days their geometry became clear. 3i Atlas was spinning a larger web, its golden lattice unfurling across millions of kilometers. Spectrographs found the same low-energy field along these new filaments, a standing wave frozen in vacuum. The comet's lantern pulsed once every few hours, and each time the filaments brightened fractionally, as if testing the connections one by one. Mars remained the anchor point, its golden funnel glowing steady, its auroras a crown of violet and gold. Take another slow breath. Imagine a spider at the center of an enormous web, lines radiating outward to every corner of a garden. That's 3i Atlas now, not just shaping a world but weaving a network across the system. On Earth, reaction swung between awe and alarm. Was this a cosmic communication network, a transport system, or something we lacked the language to name? Whatever its purpose, it was no longer confined to a single planet. The experiment had scaled up, threading the solar system with invisible paths. And through it all, Mars stood at the center like a living hub, its once dead surface now a golden nexus, breathing quietly under a canopy of interstellar filaments, a world transformed into a node on a map we had never seen before. By the 55th week, the golden lattice had become a visible constellation across the night sky. Faint but coherent lines visible in long exposure images, reaching from Mars outward to multiple points in the solar system. The network no longer looked like a set of scattered filaments, but like a deliberate diagram, an expanding mandala of light. On Mars, subtle seismic tremors returned, but now they pulsed in a spiraling pattern around the equatorial basin. The auroras braided themselves into long curtains reaching almost to the surface, curling down over canyons like luminous waterfalls. The golden wells inhaled more than they exhaled, drawing air and dust inward as if preparing for a massive intake of breath. Take a slow breath. Imagine a planet coiling like a spring, drawing energy inward, every filament tightening toward a single purpose. That's Mars now, a world awake, its skin tingling, its veins thrumming, its sky braided into strands of light. On Earth, the watchers noticed another change. The pulses they'd tracked for months shifted into a new rhythm, more complex, nested, accelerating slightly. It felt like a countdown, though no one knew to what. The sense of anticipation sharpened until even skeptics admitted it. Something was building. Then, in the 56th week, a phenomenon unfolded that no one had predicted. Across the entire Mars 3I Atlas system, a standing wave appeared, a ripple of light suspended between the comet and the planet, flickering but not moving, like a rope shaken and held at perfect frequency. The golden funnel became the wave's anchor, glowing with steady intensity. Spectrometers registered unprecedented harmonics embedded in the wave, ratios nested into ratios, fractals of energy more complex than any terrestrial signal. The auroras over Mars pulsed to the same frequency. Even Earth's magnetometers showed sympathetic flickers. The standing wave had become a kind of bridge, a resonant chord stretched taut across millions of kilometers. Take another slow breath. Imagine a single note played so perfectly it makes glass tremble, metal sing, water ripple. That's Mars now. A note sustained between two bodies, a golden ribbon of vibration stitched across space. Speculation turned feverish. Was the standing wave the final key, the unlocking mechanism for a transmission, a stabilizer for interplanetary transport, a lattice of communication so vast we could only glimpse its edges? No answers yet, but the watchers could see its shape, a golden seam glowing between worlds, holding steady as though waiting for a signal to pass. And still above, 3I Atlas remained patient, its lantern shining like an ember at the heart of an invisible web, a silent architect poised at the brink of revealing its full design. By the 57th week, the standing wave between 3I Atlas and Mars became so luminous it formed a visible golden horizon line, stretching far beyond the red planet's limb. Even amateur astronomers could pick up its faint glow with long-exposure cameras, a shimmering band like a second ringed halo framing the planet. On Mars itself, the auroras reached ground level in some regions, curling around the golden wells like vines embracing ancient ruins. Dust devils moved in perfect choreography, tracing spirals that mirrored the standing wave above. Instruments detected a faint warmth rising through the crust, not enough to trigger instability, but enough to show deep processes still active. On Earth, the watchers noticed their own skies reacting. High-latitude auroras flickered not only green but faintly gold, subtle enough to dismiss but persistent enough to measure. The sense of connection deepened. Across forums and live streams, people described the same sensation, a horizon in their minds glowing gold, as if something were forming at the edge of perception. Take a slow breath. Imagine looking out at the ocean and seeing a glowing seam of light where sky meets water, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. That's Mars now. A planet crowned by a golden horizon, a world standing at the edge of revelation. Speculation turned to the idea of transmission, that the standing wave was a carrier, a bridge, a resonant field linking not just Mars but multiple worlds. Whether communication, energy, or something else, the stage had been set. Then, in the 58th week, the entire system changed tempo. Mars's auroras stopped flickering and held steady. The golden wells inhaled deeply, drawing air and dust downward in massive coordinated flows, like lungs filling for a final massive exhalation. The standing wave brightened until it was a solid ribbon of gold across the void. Orbiters registered a sudden dip in atmospheric pressure around the equatorial basin. Not collapse, but intake. Dust fell back to the surface. Crystalline structures retracted like flowers closing at night. Even the filament linking to Earth's direction quivered faintly, as though the entire network had drawn in one long breath. On Earth, instruments showed sympathetic effects. The faint gold flicker in our own auroras dimmed. Magnetometers fell silent. People reported the same feeling, a hush, a pressure change, an anticipation in the chest. It was as if the whole system, comet, planet, and distant watchers, had inhaled together. Take another slow breath. Imagine a singer drawing in the deepest breath before releasing the first note of a song. That's Mars now, a world filled with potential energy, poised to release whatever it has been building. Speculation became a single thought. This was the last intake before the act, the moment before the final revelation. Whether a message, a transformation, or something beyond our understanding, the red planet stood ready. Above it, Three-Eye Atlas glowed brighter than ever, its lantern a miniature sun hovering at the center of a golden web. By the 59th week, the hush that had gripped the red planet and Three-Eye Atlas finally broke. The standing wave between them did not collapse. It blossomed. Orbiters recorded the golden ribbon widening into a shimmering plain, as though a curtain of light had been unfurled between Mars and the comet. Within it, nested spirals appeared, not random but organized, like the grooves of an immense record. From Mars's equatorial basin, the golden column flared upward, merging with the shimmering plain. The auroras bent inward, forming a dome of color over the basin, while the wells pulsed in synchrony, expelling streams of mist that turned into thin rainbows in the thin air. For the first time since the transformation began, Mars looked less like a planet under construction and more like a finished artifact, a jewel set in a web of light. On Earth, telescopes captured the sight, a vast glowing shape extending from Mars outward, its angles crisp enough to trace like blueprints. The internet flooded with names for it: the gate, the loom, the mirror. Some called it the unveiling because it felt like a revelation, a lifting of a veil that had covered a larger picture. Take a slow breath. Imagine watching a chrysalis split open and the wings inside unfurl in slow motion. Not a creature but an idea, a geometry taking flight. That's Mars now, the culmination of months of quiet change, its new form revealed at last. Speculation reached fever pitch. Was this a transmission array, a portal, or a final demonstration? Had Three-Eye Atlas been building toward this single moment all along? No one knew, but the sense of climax was undeniable. The red planet had become more than itself. Then, in the 60th week, the note arrived. Instruments across the solar system recorded a single, sustained pulse rising from the golden plane. A tone unlike any heard before, spanning frequencies from the lowest infrasound to the highest measurable harmonics. When converted to audio, it resembled a bell struck in a cathedral of impossible size, the sound rolling outward for minutes before fading into silence. On Mars, the auroras flared white gold, then deep violet, then settled into a steady emerald glow. The golden wells exhaled a final plume, mist curling upward into the column before dissipating. The standing wave shimmered once, twice, then dissolved into faint threads, leaving the planet's sky clearer than it had been in months. Yet the changes in the crust and atmosphere remained. Mars was no longer the world it had been. On Earth, the note arrived 14 minutes later, a soft vibration across the magnetosphere, a subtle flicker in auroras, a low hum at the edge of hearing. Millions felt it simultaneously, as though the solar system itself had exhaled. Then the tone faded, leaving only stillness. Take another slow breath. Imagine a symphony holding its last chord until it melts into silence, the hall trembling, the audience knowing they have witnessed something they cannot yet name. That's the solar system now, a world awakened, a visitor departed or transformed, a mystery completed yet still echoing. Speculation turned to awe. Perhaps it was a message, perhaps a demonstration, perhaps a warning. But one thing was clear. Three-Eye Atlas had reshaped Mars, and in doing so had reached into our own skies, our own imaginations. We had not merely observed a transformation, we had been part of it. And as the final auroras faded from Mars and the golden lattice withdrew into the comet's halo, a quiet understanding settled among the watchers. The experiment was over, or perhaps it had only just begun. The red planet turned under a calmer sky, its surface forever marked, its new atmosphere humming faintly, waiting for whatever would come next.